did a PDF of all the slides.
A sense of place, do you want me to post, just share that? Is that what you're reviewing now?
Do you have
No,
the
I was going to do the
contents?
contents first. I'm just going to mail this to you.
I have the contents too.
We're hampered by technology because there's an, I'm not on Wi-Fi, so it's hard to pull this stuff up.
I just sent it to you, Pat. Actually, there's an update on this one too, so you should get that anytime.
Oh, you want me to pull up the one you just sent?
Yeah, it's a PDF, but it has all the slides on one attached.
See on my secret files.
While you're doing that, I will reiterate for the record that Patrick Reffert, when he prepared the agenda and had it posted, had an incorrect Zoom address, if you will. However, the notices that are provided to the public by the planning board do provide that this meeting is in person, and as a courtesy to the public, Zoom access will be provided through a link, but unfortunately, that link is not valid. But the notice goes on to say, however, the meeting will not be terminated in the event that technological issues disrupt the Zoom broadcast.
Okay. This is a this is a snap view of the content table as a reordering of what the steering committee did. I was on the committee when it first started a couple of years ago, and I was on it for about a year and a quarter, or something like that. And then there was a transition to a new team who started work on it. And while I was there were a couple things that were introduced. One was the idea of making this more accessible or organizing the topics. The state requires that every community or municipality address specific things, housing for one, economic development for another, transportation. So the state requires that you need to cover what they refer to as elements. So one of the thoughts we have in making this more accessible was to combine those that are sort of like in a lot of ways to major topics. What do we want to protect? What do we want to provide as a community? And how do we want to grow? Were the three broad categories that could encompass all of the other 13 or 10 to 13 elements. So we thought it was a good strategy to do that. Now the master plan did use it in their vision sheet at one page, but we thought if that was carried into the total document, it would be more consistent, more cohesive, so the reader would be able to follow the process and the thinking on all of that. So this takes everything that the master plan committee does and kind of reorders it back to using the protect, provide, and grow. You can see on this shot of the contents, what's not here, of course, other pages beyond it, but that's a formatting thing that we can do. But just broadly speaking, beginning at the top in the intro, if you could just drop it a little, Patrick. Introduction, overview, an overview of planning and the overall planning approach used in the master plan. That was already started. That it did not significantly change. There were some additions to that. And then there were three things: visions, goals, and then I thought key issues would be consistent with that, which the vision is being sort of the overall viewpoint, the approach that was going to be used to analyze in the master plan. The goals are those that came up through workshops, surveys, and so forth. And the key issues are discussions with various stakeholders and so forth, public engagements, visioning sessions and so forth. While I was on there, there was at least one visioning session, and I think it was October or November of 2021, I think, or 22. So the difference, I was considering moving key issues from further down in the list just before the implementation section. I thought it would be appropriate up here to put all those key things on the top, because then you begin the inventory and assessment portion, which basically is in existing conditions, and some comments there on what's being done. So this is all supporting material then for the key issues. Now, this is open for debate, moving key issues or not. I'm just putting it there as an option, and I can explain it later. But the inventory and assessment would be intact with what the master plan did, with some edits, I think, by some members on that. But basically, under protect, natural resources, open space, recreation, cultural, historic resources. Those are strategies to protect the things that Hamilton residents have indicated are important to them. Number 2, provide, this would be commercial facilities and, it shouldn't be commercial, it should be community facilities and services, transportation and utility infrastructure. So these are strategies related to services and facilities that will help make Hamilton a better community in the future. It's community facilities, that was my error in typing that. Transportation and utility infrastructure. And thirdly, grow. This is how does the community want to grow? Economic development, housing, sustainability, and resiliency. And now these are all sort of under the umbrella, if you will, of a future land use, which is now looking ahead. It's the next item in that list. Future land use plan, implementation plan, next steps. The future land use is the single most important subject in this entire document as a master plan, because all of the others, recommendations, all the other implementation plans kind of funnel into how do we use the land that we have, knowing we can't create new land, and we're a built-out community, so we have to be pretty careful about what happens going forward. And so future land use then is sort of the umbrella over this whole thing. That's why I put it in a separate category in the back. And then the implementation plan is what agencies would be active and what would be the partner agencies within the town to implement the ideas that came out of the assessment plan and the implementation plan. Then at the bottom of that sheet, you have the bibliography and then the appendices, which are documentation of meetings 1, 2, and 3 held by the organization that drafted this, which was Judy Barrett and Associates. Barrett Planning. So that was their meetings. And the next item is.
Could we stop there
Yeah.
and get comments
Yeah.
as we go? I think, so I'll jump right in and say,
Incidentally, I have paper copies if you want, anybody wants
I'll
a
take
paper.
Oh, that'd be great.
Paper copies of all.
Do you want me, let me pass those out.
1, 2, 3. There you go.
Here you go, Jeff. Welcome aboard, by the way.
so I personally think this table of contents makes sense. I think obviously we have to add page numbers to it and section numbers to it. In my mind, it works. The only issue I have is I think I might like to see key issues move to looking ahead and just have that sort of where it was before, ahead of future land use and implementation steps. But I think the existing conditions inform the key issues to some extent. And so that is the rationale for why I would keep the key issues more toward the end of the document than at the very beginning. And then, so there is an introduction, and then the overview, I would put colon sense of place. So does anyone else have any comments on that?
My comment is that I think these are excellent suggestions that Emil has made, and I guess the puzzle is, this would definitely make the master plan better, and there's a good degree of effort that it would take to sort of reformat everything and re-key everything in. For example, my comments were focused around taking the existing structure, not necessarily that I thought it was the best structure, but the existing structure, and linking a few more things together. As you change this around, for example, my particular comments become less useful, and others will also be tempered in that way. So it's sort of like this is sort of like a reset of the format, which I think is excellent. And the question is, what appetite do we have to dive into actually doing the writing and reformatting for this? I
Well,
support it, and the question is, who has the bandwidth to do it? It's a practical question.
Well, I don't think the table of contents per se is a problem.
No, I'm not talking about the table of contents. I'm actually jumping ahead to Emil's whole approach to this, which I really applaud. And the question is, how we execute. So.
Well, so let's just stick with the table of contents.
Okay.
Because I don't see.
I jumped ahead, I'm sorry.
I don't quite see the seriousness of what you're saying, because he addressed goals in a certain way. And so I think the document as it stands isn't going to be torn apart by any means. It's just restructured. So does anyone else have any comment on how the table of contents has been, Emil's suggestion to reformat the table of contents?
I had a couple questions. It was confusing to me, under grow, sustainability and resiliency, whether that's referring to sustainable growth as it pertains to infrastructure, or whether or not it pertains to protecting the environment. Because if it is the latter, it was confusing because you referenced it
Yeah.
differently in a few different places, and I think it doesn't belong in grow. I think it belongs in protect, unless you're referring to it exclusively as
Yeah, that's,
sustainable development.
yeah, you can make that argument, yeah. I think it can live in any one of the three. It could live in protect. Sustainability, if you look at it, is, based on a sort of international definition of, you take the three basic entities that towns have to use to manage themselves. It's the environment, it's economic development, and it's social needs. The intersection of all those two, when you look at it, is sustainability. So sustainability is not just climate change, or, that's more the resiliency in that. But that's why it could exist in protect, because the environment needs to be protected in some ways. Economic development needs to happen, but not at the expense of other things. So it's the intersections of those three that gives you, and this comes from, I guess it was a UN report on what sustainability is.
Yeah, you're talking about somewhat of what I referred to in my email as a follow-up commenting on it. And
Well,
referring to ESG versus sustain, but
Yeah.
in my opinion, it better lives in the protect.
Well, the thing of it is, I think when you read the introduction to the goals, and there was no introduction to the goals, I think that introduction is a way of saying these different goals, even though they're organized in a certain way, they're all interrelated. Even though we've placed them in like, for example, sustainability and resiliency in a grow silo, it can live in another. And so the purpose of that introduction is to indicate that these goals they live together. And so if you want to protect open space and recreation goals, for example, Patton Park, well, you might want to think about how you can design those gardens in a way that they will be sustainable without pesticides, and they will last a long time. And that the structures that are built will also last a long
Yep.
time.
Yep.
So I think that's why, when I said at the outset that the purpose here is to really add information about the relatedness of things, and so that people can see that even though something is in a column, it doesn't mean it can only be in that column.
Yep. And then my other comment was just going to be pretty much reiterating what Jonathan said, I think, in a different way, but in that you can't, I don't think, slap this on the top of the existing master plan and have it be cohesive. And you have to restructure and reorganize it so that it,
You have to move the pieces in the master plan,
you
but
have to
it's
move the
all-
pieces around and potentially even address. and
That's the question, is
rewrite a
it
few
worth
of them.
doing, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely
would
think it's
say
worth doing. The question is
absolutely is
who's willing to do it. So before we get into that question, an example of what I was talking about is by moving key issues up with vision and goals, it absolutely makes sense, and it's cohesive, and it's integrated, and it just is right.
Yeah,
However, let me just finish. However, the way this document is structured, key issues is the lead-in to the implementation, and they're jammed together, they're stuck together. So you'd have to reorganize that, which I would applaud. And the question is, who's going to do it?
yeah, those are good comments. The reason I moved it up, actually, because I think it belongs up on the top.
Love
Only
it.
because it's not looking forward, it is
Yes.
this is identification of issues in the community now, so that's a place to put it. And then, I think what Barrett did in their inventory and assessment is kind of combine existing conditions with strategies or with action items. And by doing that, by not separating existing conditions, because those could have actually gone in an appendix, so that makes a document shorter, easier to read. And if you want to read the detail of existing conditions in the back, it's in the end of the document. But that is something I don't want to get in there and change any of the inventory and assessments, other than mistakes, in there. But,
Right. So like
so
a specific example.
It's not the best place, but I think it's a preferred place,
So I guess to get more specific to what I just mentioned, how would, in this organization, how would you see, if at all, modifying the implementation charts to not get disconnected the way it would if we just moved key issues out of there? Because key issues is sort of the intro to that chart, which is kind of a dry set of data points, and it really doesn't say much the way it's formatted. Whereas if you come right out of key issues, it sort of has context, but not much. So,
Yeah, the next level of difficulty is to take each one of the implementation associated with protect, plan, and grow, provide and grow categories, and actually put in the implementation for each one of those,
agreed,
would be the place to put it.
agreed.
That's a whole different,
Exactly.
the steering committee did a lot of work on this.
Yes,
And I'm
yes.
not here to take it apart. Is this more readable? Is this more understandable?
100%.
I think what can happen is that the inventory and assessment can just track the table of contents. So the inventory and assessment, the land use component will be a separate section. But then the transportation and the cultural resources and all that can track the protect, provide, grow. So it's just a question of reorganizing, not rewriting the existing conditions, just putting them in a different order with
The thornier part is the implementation chart.
right, absolutely. So, let's try and take this step by step.
Sorry, I keep jumping ahead.
That's usually what I do. So, we have an introduction right now, but we now have an overview, and that, I think, is the sense of place, which I think is excellent. Does anyone have, so in terms of the table of contents, I like that. The inventory and assessment can track the table of contents. We're not going to be rewriting the inventory and assessment. We will just put them in a different order with headings. And so let's just now look at the overview with respect to the sense of place.
Well, the goals, let me just say, the goals, what was written here as with the overview on the goals, which is this one. This planning effort should recognize that certain qualities of history, culture, and community are interconnected, timeless, and meaningful. Our built environment and the protection of our unique natural and cultural resources are the physical foundation of town planning. What will Hamilton be in 20 to 30 years? Will we secure our identity and build places we care about? And in what ways can we manage our future? This was just a paragraph, I think, that was missing in the goals. I think they had just introduced this block, which I think is the next sheet, a block of items in the goals. So this is more of an introduction overview of, this kind of frames what we're really trying to do here in terms of, and I think take a little bit out of it. The master plan's a little bit dry when you read it, and I just wondered if some of the language could get more meaningful for Hamilton maybe, and, because it is a very specific, it's an established community, and it has a character, and some of that ought to come out, in the document. Because one of the things that I have heard anyway is preserving community character is very important to people here, in addition to schools, in addition to, many other things. But that seems to be one that people, again, that came from a lot of surveys that, in the first part of the master plan development. So that, I'm not gonna read the whole sheet there, but this would be, and then I would add, the next sheet would be the charts for the goals, which is, can you just advance that? Yeah.
Could I just interrupt you, though, for
Yeah.
1 minute? Okay, so I'm a
It's
little
not
confused.
sense of place, it was the goals was the next step. in the
So
sequence.
where do you intend to put the sense of
I was gonna
place
get to
in
that.
your table of contents?
Yeah, that,
So it's not in the table of contents, and that's what
it should have been in how do we wanna grow, in my opinion. It should have been in that section, so grow would be the last one. Because that's the place, that describes everything looking forward, what we've identified what the issues are, and now when you make changes, we have to observe what those provisions are in the sense of place.
Okay, so when we get there, I'm being pedantic, but
Yeah.
in terms of
It
how.
should be in there, it's not.
It's not in the table of contents, so I want to see precisely where.
Well, I
you
wanted to
are.
find out if anybody's interested in having it in there, number one, but to me, by community character, it really is, what does the public really value in this town, and how would you set it down if you were to come up with a list of things in the community that must be preserved, what would that list consist of? And it could be buildings, places, it could be experiences, like public events, it could be any number of things that the town treasures, and a good way to look at that, look at the community is through resources. What are the natural resources we have that are cherished? What are the visual resources, the scenic resources that we have here that people can identify with and want to see more of or less of or something? Those are two, and then certainly the historic cultural resources, historic district, buildings, old buildings, that are documents of the past here in town, so that's another one. So you could, by looking at your community as resource, as a series of resources, you can look at and identify particular things and start to develop a list of treasures here in the community that really go a long way, and so that when we build, we've identified what it is that should not be changed going forward. So a sense of place is actually, from my standpoint, should be in grow. Should be grow, but also it could be in protect, because that's community character, and so it could be either one of those categories.
Actually, I have to disagree a little bit, because I think a sense of place is what people at the Master Plan Steering Committee were trying to articulate about Hamilton. So I don't think there's anything in what you've written about a sense of place that dictates that it has to go either protect or grow. It's sort of like, a sense of place is something that people might never be able to put into words, but it's
Marnie?
what they feel about the
Do you
town.
think it could go into the introduction? It could be
Yes.
the introduction, because
Yes,
I
I
think it reads
thought-
beautifully.
I think
It should
it's
be
so
number one.
important that well, so I think the introduction that was written is okay, but we have overview here, and I think that maybe with a tweak or two, we can say a sense of place is what we love about Hamilton, that's what exists now, but it also is something that we need to preserve
Could do
when
that.
we grow.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
see my point now?
Yeah, this was not complete. I mean, all I did was write up the first page, but there's a lot more to go after that I didn't have time to get into. And again, it's up there if there's any interest in pursuing it. But, I think your comment is pretty good on making it the introduction or part of that.
Yeah,
as
I think
a
it's,
statement about,
Yeah,
Yes,
I think so too.
it-
the first thing.
it defines where we are, and it's what we want to protect, and since we
We
want
need
to
to feature
protect
it.
it, we have to be mindful of it when we grow.
It looks like
That's the
there's,
thing with these things. They don't exist in little silos.
That's right.
They permeate everything,
it looks like
permeates everything.
it's got some overlap with the overview in goals. You're
Right.
referring to some of the same things in bullets. And I think there's probably a way to combine the two into one thing. I don't think they have to be separate things.
Well,
goals is another,
Yeah,
The overview under goals, there's a lot of the same topics in the sense of place. And I think,
yeah, what this is a
Combine the
series
two.
of ideas that are put down on paper. Now, when you try to put them together, to see, maybe they don't make sense,
I think you don't have to call it a sense of place. I think it's just part of the overview and the goals for the plan itself.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Either
agree,
way, I
it does
mean-
tie together nice.
I guess the only thing, is it something that the board wants to keep in as an item? I think I haven't seen it addressed in any other, in the master plan, in any section, but I think that's a critical one to talk about.
Right, I think, Pat, there is some overlap, but I think that the sense of place, I like the terminology sense of
I do
place.
too.
And I also think that
It's meaningful.
the goals, the overview of goals is also important, because, as I said before, the goals are they're very interrelated. I mean, and if you pursue one goal, it will affect another goal. So I think that we could probably, as you say, maybe combine these so that we can transition from vision to existing conditions, but have the information that's in this, with the sense of place and the introduction to the goals as something that's meaningful and important to put in the document. Any other comment? Jonathan, do you have a sense of this?
I 100% support more qualitative information going in here, as Emil is adding, because this master plan tends to be thin on qualitative information and thin on positioning things. So, again, my question stands, how far, I totally support this, how far do we want to go with this? And who has the time to type and format? I'm sorry to be a broken record on it.
I think it's worth doing, and I'm willing
Absolutely.
to participate in it, but
Absolutely.
I also don't want to be giving the deadline of like, the next meeting.
Yeah,
I want to be like,
I
it's
see
taken
this
us
as-
3 years to get to this point.
I
and
see
there's,
this
like,
as-
more done in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
feel like the
I
past
see this
week-
as as months, not weeks, to put
Yeah.
together if we're going to take this approach. Again, I 100% support it. I think it would make this document much stronger, more easy to use, and more meaningful.
Right. Well,
100% support.
I'm going to cut this baby in half. I think we can get this work done. I think we might have to have, a volunteer to synthesize the material for the benefit of the planning board. But if the consensus is that we like Emil's sense of place and we like his introduction to goals, we can fashion something between vision and existing conditions, which are now going to be reorganized under protect, provide, and grow. So I think that can work. And then, do you agree? I mean, with that? I mean, so that, I think that you can have an introduction to goals with sense of place and an overview, however you wanted to structure it. I always think better when I'm at the computer, but I can see merging these documents, and if you had anything additional to add, it helps people to understand what is going to emerge as key issues and to be able to look at the existing conditions just as stepping stones to the other elements of the master plan. So I don't think that looking at these two documents, the overview, sense of place, and the overview, which is really an introduction to goals, is a mammoth undertaking. I think that could be done in relatively short order.
Well, we have 3 weeks to the next meeting, I think, right?
Right. So,
Unless we were going to move that up, but or eliminate the first meeting. We
that's
can talk
something
about that
we can
later.
talk about at the end. I don't, in fact, fortunately, Patrick's not here, so I don't have the rationale for why our meeting dates are the way they are. So, should we turn now to the goals themselves?
Well, the key issues, I think, might be the next.
Well, yeah, the key issues, and so that, I suggested that the key issues move to the end, basically because of the point that Jonathan made. Those key issues, they lead into the implementation plan. And I think the implementation plan is the part of the document that really needs some restructuring.
If this part's going to be restructured, it begs for the implementation plan to be rethought.
Has to be.
It begs for it.
You can't, the goals don't align with nothing aligns if you don't.
Well,
Right.
that's the implementation plan has to carry through the theme of protect,
Yes.
provide,
Agreed.
and grow.
Yep.
So, again, I don't know that the implementation plan components have to be thrown out the window.
No, but
just
you'd have to
have to be
completely reorganize it.
Reorganized,
Yes.
exactly. And so-
Reorganize, reformat.
Right, and so to me, the planning board's task is to reorganize, and it's someone else's task to reformat. I mean, that's a secretarial function.
Okay.
To actually make make,
Because there's days worth of reformatting in there, once you get the content right. Again, I support it.
that's above
I
my
just-
pay grade. I couldn't reformat it. Is that I'm not sure what kind of,
It's a Word document
Is
they
it
gave us, yeah.
but is the implementation plan,
I
the
assume that,
components are a Word
I
document,
assume
but
they're all Word.
well,
So-
if it's a Word document, it shouldn't be too
It
bad.
is a Word document. But I would go back to, I think, Jonathan, that in every goal-setting event, you identify goals and opportunities. And I think key issues can be looked at in a brighter way is defining them as opportunities. And if you set out to do that first in the document, then I wouldn't wait until the implementation plan to identify to declare the opportunities.
Yeah.
I would do that at the beginning and do it in alignment with the goals. And again, redefine them as the opportunities and not necessarily the things of the town that are the issue that everyone's trying to, it's what opportunities do we have in front of us, not like what is horrible that we're trying to fix, because it's just, I think you look at the implementation plan a little bit differently
Agreed.
when you identify it that way.
100%. 100%.
Well, so is the consensus then that the key issues be
Opportunities.
at the,
I'd
Yeah,
like to call
I
it
agree, I
opportunities.
agree with him. It's not a great term for it. I would call them opportunities,
I like
not
that idea.
issues. So, and I think that the implementation chart needs to be looked at afresh. And my approach to the whole thing was, we're not completely changing the document, so I put some Band-Aids on it. So I would peel all my Band-Aids off and start over again with this thinking. So, and I agree with this thinking 100%. 100%.
well, I'm going to be the practical devil's advocate. Because there is a question of bandwidth on this, and so I think we have to not set the bar so high that we lose focus here.
Right, but
And-
the implementation chart, we'll call it, does not, especially if Emil adds these pieces to it, it just doesn't stand up to the lead up to it.
And keep in mind, I mean, this process started in 2020. We're asking for a couple months after a 4-year effort to make a significant improvement. And I don't know how much support it gets in its current format, otherwise. I think we haven't done it since the early 2000, right? 2004 or something like that.
2004, yep.
We haven't done it since 2004, so it's to miss the opportunity to fix it now and spend the time to fix it right. Not adding another 2 years to the effort, but adding another couple of months at least.
It's
think
what I
we
just
do-
said, it's months, not weeks.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
6 months, but
It's
it's
not-
not 3 weeks, it's not 6
It's
weeks.
not the next meeting.
No,
No, it's not the next meeting. I mean, I think the implementation plan almost should await completion of some of the other components.
agreed. It should grow out of the body of the master plan, not be the tail wagging the dog here.
Right.
I have a completely different question. I looked at the calendar and it looks like, I didn't know if Juneteenth had something to do with why we couldn't do that week for our meeting. But do you want me to go and see if this room is available for the 18th? Because that might be one of the reasons why we don't have this room might have been booked.
It might have been booked.
But I
So-
didn't know somebody might still be at the desk and I might be able to ask before they close at 8. So I didn't know if you want me to go out there and ask and see if it's available?
Well,
Or do we
there's
want to
an
stick with the
There's
schedule?
an alternative, that'd give us 3 weeks. to
Right,
make
that's
changes.
fine, I just,
But the other thing is, then there's a meeting scheduled a week after that, the 2nd, I think, of June.
Yeah,
If
Oh,
that,
right.
if that were to be canceled, so we have one meeting in the next month, then we're not gonna have back-to-back meetings,
Right,
week to
right.
week.
Yeah.
Especially if there's not much on the agenda for,
I'd support that, give them more time.
right,
It's hard to move dates around, but it's easy to drop them.
right.
I can't, it's hard.
but we generally take a one-off in August, usually, not always, but.
Right.
That was my first motion that got denied last year.
You were busy last year.
To drop
And then we tried in
meetings in
December and it
November.
didn't work.
And then I also tried in December.
Anyways, all right, that was a side note, I just didn't know if we wanted to pursue that.
So if this can be given more time, I think it's definitely
Mhm.
worthwhile to
Mhm.
pursue all these changes. But if we're going to try to squeeze it into a short time frame, I think it's just not realistic.
well, I think we can make a big start by the 25th. I mean, I think we can get progress on the sense of place and the introduction to goals. I don't see that as insurmountable. Then then we need to look at the goals, and I think that we're not too far afield on the goals. The goals are supposed to be relatively general. And now that Emil's taken a look at them, they are now organized in the format that we have used, the protect, provide, and grow. So is that an issue for anyone, the way they're presently structured?
Not the way they're structured, but I did have some comment on the content. And we can review that at some other point or now, or,
We could do that now. So you had actual, because I got your materials, Pat. If I were a teacher, I would say your homework was late at 4 o'clock. So I had a hard time,
I said it was right on
you know,
time.
finding. So anyhow, you did make changes to the goals.
Markdown, agreed.
And so we could look at them. Does everyone have Pat's proposed changes to the
The
goals?
goals,
I
yeah,
don't.
the goals chart.
But you have to remember, it's not our goals. These goals are the goals that the steering committee gleaned from public input. So
Right.
I really urge and caution planning board members from going far afield on these things, because in a sense, the ship sailed. We can't substitute our judgment for what the steering committee determined was what the public was essentially proposing through the different presentations that the consultants used. So with that said,
I guess my comment on natural resources, I took a more holistic ESG approach to expanding the, it's not just the environment, but also preserving biodiversity and enhancing climate resiliency. And
Well-
eliminated the reference to carbon neutral 2040 because there wasn't, I think, a bad place to start without having an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions or a plan or.
well, I was thinking about that, and that might be something that would go in the implementation section.
Right.
Sure.
Because I think that if we have the goal of protecting our natural, how do we do that? We do what you're suggesting here in the goal. So the goal should be quite general, but the implementation section is how do we get there? So the town of Hamilton has an energy coordinator who
Yes.
works 7 hours a week. That's not many hours, to monitor the energy consumption of town buildings and that type of thing. And we have a environmental impact committee, and of course, we have the carbon neutral goal and, other goals. So what I think you're saying is how do we implement the goal? And maybe that's through some type of a governance component that you can put together, and that's in an implementation
Sure.
section.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
follow me? So, I'm a little leery of changing the goals too much, but I'm more open to how to implement them in the implementation section.
Yeah, I see that point. It's a little, I don't know where the carbon neutrality by 2040, that's always just a tough thing for me to wrap my arms around, is just throwing the dart at the board without knowing where you are, how to get there.
Well, right, so,
Needed.
but then all of this has to be in the context of what the town can afford to do, too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and that's why some of these goals and the implementation of them, they were considered after meetings with town officials, and we have to be very mindful of what our town's capacity is.
Yep.
I mean, one of the implementation items is to actually have a town planner, in addition to Patrick Reffert's position, which is the Director of Planning and Inspectional Services. So divide up his job, if you will. But, you know, all of that takes money. So our goals and implementation have to be in that context. But, so, we have community facilities and services, and you have community and educational services,
Facilities.
facilities.
I guess, yeah, I wanted to emphasize the focus towards providing the highest quality infrastructure available to support economic development. And then also facilities that support community services that engage the town members. It might be the same goal using different words, I acknowledge that. On the utility infrastructure goal part, I thought provide adequate utility infrastructure was maybe a low bar. I thought maybe better put, you would say, improve the quality and reliability of our infrastructure required to support the needs of the community from a capacity perspective. So not just the adequate utility to meet demand, but
Right.
improving the quality and resilience and the reliability of that utility.
I think, Pat, that your changes, you know, I can look at these,
Okay.
and I can easily see myself incorporating some of this language, maybe not verbatim,
Got it, yeah.
but trying to integrate what you're suggesting into the goals.
Sure.
So if, what I'm getting at here is that there's gonna be a little subcommittee, to kind of put this together and then bring it back to the full body. We can't keep this process going ad nauseum. I mean, we have to, you know, trust me, because I'll be primarily involved in integrating this stuff, to get the sense of where we are. It might not be exactly what you want, but I want to try and get the sense of where we are.
No, I get it.
Do you agree,
Yeah.
Emil? Does anyone else have any comments then about the goals?
Well, is the sustainability and resiliency goals and the utility infrastructure goals, are those two new sections? Those are both two new sections.
Those were not included in the original master
Right.
plan.
Right.
And then I just had a question about adding, like, in addition to water and sewer services, because we don't really have sewers now, so is that like thinking we would be moving into sewers, or what? Or am I missing, I don't know, if I,
No, something's gonna happen in the downtown area, you know, at some point. I don't know whether, you know, how that wastewater management is gonna happen down there, but,
so there would be some kind of sewer system in downtown? Is that
Well,
what
there-
you're suggesting?
if there is development there, there has to be sanitary, wastewater treatment.
It
or-
may not be, you know, town sewer the way
It's
you
not-
imagine it
it's
in
not a
other
main sewer.
communities. It wouldn't be that.
Right, I was just surprised to see sewer service, that was just
To
not
take it
something
out,
in
no,
my,
but-
yeah.
But that might also be inclusively referencing, you know, shared septics or things like that. So I think the idea
Yeah,
of leaving it in
shared.
there makes it, you know, at least it acknowledges that it's a need. It doesn't say that there's an existing central sewage system.
Yeah, it could even
I
be
wouldn't
a-
take it out.
Could be a public-private enterprise too.
Right.
You know, where,
There's different ways to
Different
be
ways to do
creative
it.
about it.
yeah.
Okay, the only question that I have with these additional goals is to see if they can be integrated, if you will, into the existing conditions, and I will take a look at that.
I have one other thing, so the land use goal, is that no longer, that looks like, I didn't see it, oh, it's down here looking ahead, sorry.
Right.
I was looking up top for that one, got it.
Is land use the same as land stewardship, or are there different elements under stewardship?
Well, land,
Well,
Land use is, I think,
Could be the opposite of stewardship.
not as broad. I guess I would say it's not as broad as stewardship.
Right.
well,
Stewardship would include other things
Yeah.
rather than
yeah,
how you
that's
use
right.
the land. I mean, maybe land stewardship is a better term to
Yeah.
describe what we're trying to do in that.
Well, stewardship doesn't necessarily include change,
right.
whereas land use is including change. And I don't think it precludes stewardship, but maybe there's a better term that is inclusive. I mean, my main thrust in looking at any of this is every piece was disparate and siloed, and Emil's move to turn it into protect, provide, and grow starts to put it together. But anything we can do to pull pieces together, I think, will improve this master plan. So, in other words, if you can think of another word for it, that's great, but I don't think land use by itself, it's not about development, it's
Right.
about stewardship and growth.
Yeah, it's one of the elements that is stipulated by the state, that the municipality
to
or
be in
town
there.
has to be in here with that description, land use, so.
Okay, so we're making progress here. So, Pat, with respect to some of the other material you put about the environmental, social, and governance, that goes in the implementation section, I think. You know, that's where that would,
It was just a separate document under sustainability and resiliency, and I thought there was some missed opportunities there to
Yeah, that was
look at
just,
it with,
that was just the beginning. Again, we can add to that, to fill it out.
I would be willing to
Yeah.
take a shot at this one.
Yeah.
you know, the goal for sustainability and resiliency should be short. I mean, it's not, the goal section is not the section for an elaborate, dissertation on,
Yeah, again, those were more related to the overview of sustainability and resiliency. I
Well,
think
the
came
way I
mostly out of that Hamilton Environmental Impact Committee.
yeah, and so the way I looked at it, it's, to me, it almost, it is a goal, but it has to permeate all the other goals. You know, it has to, every decision that's made with respect to housing, with respect to transportation, all of those should consider the sustainability and the resiliency of what is being proposed. So it's a goal, but it permeates all the other ones. It's a little bit like land use. It just, it spreads through everything. So that's the tricky part of trying to put all this information in a silo. And that was the problem with this document, is it didn't really focus on how all these things are connected and interrelated. But I think we have enough discussion that we can go forward with the goals. Agreed? Yes, no? Speak now? Do you
Yes, I
have
think so.
Okay, good. So, the existing conditions, we're going to reorganize, and that will be a little tricky, because I think we have to, we can't add existing conditions with respect to utility infrastructure goal or the community facilities and whatever, but we will have to kind of integrate them into, I think the term that was used was, community facilities and services. So services, in a sense, is a provision of infrastructure, so we can work through that.
I did like the idea of posting the inventory as part of an appendix.
Doing what?
It's a lot to slog through when you're trying to get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Doing what is the?
Putting the inventory
The existing
The as-built
conditions
information is something.
is
as
an
attachment.
appendix.
Or something.
You can always, it's interesting stuff, but it's not part of a plan.
This was the history of the master plan steering committee is about existing conditions. Because the initial consultant spent the members of that team spent their entire time
Entire
working on
40,000.
existing conditions. And then when Barrett Planning took over and looked at the existing conditions, they felt they were inadequate and rewrote them, at which time there was little time left to do anything else.
Because some of them also are as-built as of 2021, some are 22, some are 23, depending on
Right.
what section you look at.
And
it's
I
different days.
can't tell you how round and round it was with these things. I mean, just to get the data in there and have it correct.
Yeah.
And then the pushback when when members of the steering committee made those points.
Yeah.
So these existing conditions, as I look at them, they're well, I won't say it. I was gonna say if you have insomnia, or this might be a remedy. But, you know, there's a lot of good information in here, but it's deadly. Whether we should put them as an appendix or not, that's something we can decide at a later time. I don't think we have to decide that now, do you?
No, that's a lot of work.
To what?
Separate that, there are some, it's not all existing conditions, but we can talk about that later. Yeah.
Well, maybe we need to, you know, it's an inventory and assessment.
It is.
So, you know,
Yeah.
that's why maybe it doesn't belong in a footnote, because it is an assessment.
Yeah.
We'll have to try and see what happens with these, but in terms of rewriting them, I have no appetite for a third go-round on
No.
these.
I think we have a volunteer in the crowd.
I just have a quick question.
Participate.
What you're exactly just talking about, just to clarify. I've heard a bunch of these.
Please, ma'am, you need to go to the podium and identify yourself. And as I said, this is not the opportunity to comment on this.
I'm not about the master. So, hi, Deb Safford. I just have a quick question. I've heard at a few of these meetings, the concern about the prior consultants and the work that they did over the years. And really, it's all been since COVID. And I'm just wondering, what did we pay for these consultants for the product that is requiring you guys to do all this rewrite, which I applaud that you guys are doing it to make it better
I think
and
that's
readable.
that's
And I'm
some-
just curious what the cost
that's
was
a
to the
quest-
town.
That's a question you would have to ask the town manager. The master plan steering committee was not involved in, you know, addressing the invoices that the consultants provided.
Did the master plan steering committee, aren't they a subset of the planning board?
No, no, no.
It's underneath the town?
The town manager.
Yeah, the master plan steering committee had representatives of different groups, like the planning board and the school committee, but other members were appointed by the select board. And the town manager was responsible for the payment of the
So you guys are just the recipient of something that was a whole
Yes,
separate, whole different
yes,
entity?
yes. And there definitely were some issues, and that's why the process was so long. So I don't really see, you know, Jonathan, to your point, that we can really pull apart the inventory and assessment. I think that would be, in some respects, disrespectful to the master plan
Yeah,
steering
and I
committee.
think it's the least important section to work on. I think the other sections that we've been focusing on are the more valuable pieces.
I agree. And I will read it over, maybe for the third or fourth time, you know, to see if there's any information in there that really needs to be pulled out somehow, some way. But this inventory and assessment is what it is, and it can inform the key issues, for
It's
example.
kind of reference material, and let it be.
Yeah.
And if it needs to be reordered, that's fine, but I wouldn't try to edit it.
Yeah, I think that just reordering it in accordance with Emil's table of contents
Yeah.
solves that problem.
Yep.
Okay, so now we can move on to, I think the next section is key issues, isn't it? And again, you know, I'm amenable to whatever the sense of the planning board is as to where they should go. I don't think that's the absolute critical component here, because we can always circle back when we go to the implementation section by having
Well, before you do that,
some type of introduction.
every section virtually was missing an introduction or an
Right,
overview, which
exactly.
Emil started to fill in.
Yeah,
Right.
And the implementation plan kind of comes out of nowhere.
yeah.
Right.
It just sort of appears, and you're not even sure how to read it or use it. And so Emil has sort of put a positioning introductory piece that, you know, maybe you could talk about a little bit. And then what I did is I tried to create an introduction that gave a little tiny bit more context to looking at that chart and tried to, you know, using Band-Aids, try to create some linkages between the items in that chart, but it was really kind of a weak attempt at fixing something that isn't very well positioned or organized.
Yeah,
And similarly, I will also point out, I did an introduction as well.
Right, so
So there are
obviously,
three
we
of
all saw the same deficiency, and we all approached it from a slightly different direction, and it might be that the best of each piece could be put
Exactly.
together.
Just merge it together.
Yes,
and-
yes,
and-
yes.
And I think that's relatively, maybe not easy to do, but.
It's doable.
It's doable.
Yes.
I mean, because each of us had a different approach to it, but I think we were all trying to say the same thing.
Yeah.
That the resolution of these issues can't be looked at.
In silos,
In a silo.
yes.
So wouldn't you agree with that?
absolutely. I mean, I knew you were working on key issues as an intro overview. Marty was. My only goal was that it hadn't not been identified anywhere in the master plan. Where did these issues come from? You know,
Right, yes.
were there, I know there were surveys, I know there's visioning session.
Well, you know, I asked
So I-
another member of the master plan steering committee, because you had asked me that. And, and Rosie Kennedy was on the master plan steering committee. I said, Rosie, where did these key issues come from? And she said, Barrett Planning. So,
Yeah,
I mean, that was her recollection. So, I mean, that, the master plan steering committee wasn't actually drafting the document. We were evaluating what the Barrett Planning did. So when I looked at the key issues, and I rewrote all of them, or not rewrote all of them, but edited all of them, I added an introduction, but I also then put them in the protect, provide, grow construct. So the key issue, I try, and it probably could be even, done even better, but I put them in that same construct.
So here's a question. Right now, Emil, the way you have your table of contents set up is you've got your vision goals and key issues all integrated, and then it's interrupted by the inventory and assessment, and then you get down to looking ahead. Could we take all the inventory and assessment and kind of put it where it belongs as a reference material, almost like an appendix? And then get the implementation plan and the next steps right up near key goals, key issues and goals. In other words, this is almost stood on its head. Let's finish standing on its head in terms of organization. Does that make any sense? Emil, does that make any sense to you?
yeah. I thought from the beginning it ought to be in the appendix.
It only
existing.
makes sense the way this is set up.
Again, I don't want to disrespect the. steering
Yeah,
committee.
but I think we're this far, we're almost there. Let's just finish putting it in the right order. I would promote
I'm
that.
open to
Then,
I mean, certainly,
otherwise, the implementation plan is like an orphan at the end of the document, and it already is a bit orphaned the way it's set up.
But you could make the argument that the existing conditions really sort of lays the groundwork for an implementation plan, sort of lays out there what it is in that particular category, and, so if it's land use, there's a land use section in the, inventory and assessment, and then in the implementation, there's, right after that, there is a land use, goals and so forth.
I think what we need to do
Well,
is look at the inventory and assessment one more time and see if it's more inventory or more assessment.
right. So what's interesting to look at is the 2004 master planning structure is much more integrated.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're going to really take it to the next step, you could look at that as a format. It's really effective. But that's really a lot of work to
Yeah.
get it to there. And the question is, how far do we go? What's the balance of effort here?
I think the balance of effort is to pretty much leave those inventory and assessment the way they are.
I would agree. That's what I said the first time. But again, we need to be conscious of where the balance point is. But I think if we-
restructured, there'll be more meaning.
Yes. But I think if we do that, and if we leave the implementation plan at the end, it needs much more positioning than it
The
has right now.
implementation plan.
Yes, it
Gets
can't
lost
stand on
almost,
its
yeah.
own as a dry chart.
The implementation plan needs a big introduction that
Yes.
ties
Gotta be
together the
overview.
vision,
Yes,
the
yes,
goals, and
yes.
the issues.
yes. And positions how to look at it and how to read it and
Yeah,
what its
Right.
purpose in life is.
right.
There's no whole lot of work to shove it up on the top versus leaving it to the end, though.
Right.
You know, we could still have the inventory assessment sit the way it is, but just have it be last.
Well, how about this? You know, let's just see what, do I have a volunteer for
I
helping
will,
me with this
Bernie,
project?
I will help you.
But, and Emil's very critical to this, so, I think, so, but we'll make a stab at it and then bring it back. I don't want to touch the implementation plan.
I
till the
agree.
Other components are
I
done.
agree, yeah. But I think what you could do is you could take a stab at coordinating the front part, because I think there's some good bones to it, and see how it comes together, because we've got a lot of good ingredients that now need to be mixed together a little bit. See how it comes together, and then after you've put the front part into a better, more cohesive form, maybe the board could come back together and decide whether the implementation plan stays where it is at the end, or whether it comes forward.
Right. That's easy enough. That decision is simple. I
Yep.
mean, it is what it is. It's not that bad.
And then
So-
it'll also inform whether that implementation plan needs more love in terms of format and presentation.
Right.
Not just an introduction, but does the chart need to be better?
I'd like to look at the chart and even the way we've described, those action plans too. I think need some to better tie them. I guess it's not clear in how they're outlined that they meet the goal intent.
They tend to be tied more with the key issues than the goals,
That's
which is
right.
weird.
Which is super weird.
Yeah. In other words, they mirror the issues instead of mirroring the goals, which seems backwards.
Circular.
Yeah. So, so that's my concern. And on top of that, there's too many abbreviations, and the columns are counterintuitive and whatnot. So I tried my hand at, like I say, some Band-Aids, but they're really pretty lame.
It's not a lot of work. There's not a whole heck of a lot of them. It's pretty, I think it'd be easy
Yeah.
work. It's less work than what we're talking about doing in the front.
Yep. I don't, yeah,
Probably
I agree.
as,
It
if
probably
not
wouldn't
more
be, it
valuable.
wouldn't be that hard to realign it with goals and stop mirroring the key issues. But it's a lot of formatting.
Well, as I said, let's leave the implementation plan to the end. Let's not, I think it's premature to even look at it. We've pointed out its deficiencies. Once we've got this other work completed, the implementation plan should make more sense once we make the appropriate amendments to it. And it is, you know, the so-called key issues actually need to be tied to the goals as well.
Yes, yes, agreed. And they're not.
And they're not. So, as I said, I mean, you provided an introduction to the key issues, am I correct? And you provided an introduction.
And you
to-
did.
Yeah.
So there's three.
There are three.
Right.
And then, when I did with respect to the key issues, I tried to, especially with the more controversial topics in town, you know, take out anything but the facts, just the facts, ma'am. You know, not any kind of commentary about them, because with respect to some of those issues, they have to be addressed, but the voters in Hamilton will be the ultimate, they will make the ultimate determination about how the town proceeds. So they can't be ignored, but, you know, you always hope for the best and plan for the worst. So we can't just ignore, you know, the elephant in the room. The key issues that I did, I don't know if anybody has.
Wait a minute. The elephant being 3A.
3A, Ken and Norm.
I think you could write the master plan without any reference to 3A whatsoever. That
I-
what you can do is, the goal of the master plan is to set out what the town would like to see for itself, and that would include, you know, a transportation-centric, you know, redevelopment, but at whatever density the town would like, or the town thinks is appropriate for a New England town. And that way, we're in a position, should we ever need to say, look, we take transportation centricity as being a very important issue. This is our town, this is how we would like to do it. And, you know, if that's not what 3A wants, well, you know, then we can start fighting. But don't start with 3A, start with what the town wants, never mention 3A, and say, then that puts us in a position to go to the state and say, you know, we take this very seriously, here's what we would like. And, you know, whether it's 750 units or 35 units or units of this type or not, you know, let's come up with what we want, and then just leave it out there. And leave it up to the state to say to us, that's not adequate. Or they might actually say, all right, you guys have made a good enough faith, we'll accept this plan even if it doesn't have the requisite numbers. But just put out what you want.
Agreed. Because the way it reads now, reads like we're trying to figure out a way to comply, which I don't think is the goal of the town.
This should not be, you know, a compliance document. This should be a long-range plan that we would like, but I mean, I think it's important for the plan to acknowledge the underlying issues, which is how to better utilize, you know, a transportation hub to house people, but just stay away from any numbers and stay away from any mention of 3A.
And similar to the Winthrop School, focus on improving commercial development in town and enhance what we
Yeah, I
have
think I'd
and
stay
not
away from this.
necessarily.
I think I'd stay away from the school issue too. We don't really have anything to say about it. We're not experts in education, and just, you know, both sites are, you know, possible for development, and then just, that's it.
Well, what I attempted to do was just state this is the law, these are the issues, and the town will decide. So I personally think that we should recognize that there's that potential obligation out there. I think it's naive to think that it will not, that it will entirely go away. It may be changed, but I don't think it's going to. I'd be surprised if the Supreme Judicial Court said the act itself was invalid. I could see them saying that the guidelines are invalid. So that's my personal opinion. It may not, come to that. I mean, we do not know what the Supreme Judicial Court will determine. But I think it's helpful for the town to know what the Supreme Judicial Court considers the issues to be. And I put that in my revision of the key issues. What are the key issues? And the Supreme Judicial Court determined the key issue to be is what are the provisions in the statute itself the sole remedy, or in other words, are there other remedies, and also whether the Attorney General has standing to enforce this. So,
Wouldn't you rather go to the Supreme Judicial Court and argue that we agree with all the issues that the legislature raised, and we have a long-standing master plan here that meets those issues? We just think it's totally implausible to meet their particular set of numbers. That's a very compelling argument.
well, actually, what I personally think would be wise is if the Select Board were to determine that an amicus brief before the Supreme Judicial Court would be well-founded. And I think that what the Select Board could do in instructing Town Council is to potentially adopt the legal reasoning advanced by counsel to the town of Milton, for example.
Right.
But take the opportunity to educate the Supreme Judicial Court about how particularly the guidelines have such potential negative effect on the town.
I think at our last meeting, I had asked if we could, as a planning board, discuss whether we wanted to, for us to discuss an amicus brief and make a recommendation to the select board as a planning board. And saying, not just waiting for the select board to take it up, but actually from the planning board say, we think the town should send in an amicus brief. And as a planning board, we've discussed it, and these are the reasons why. And because you just said that, I think it's a valid suggestion. I don't think we have the authority as a planning board to send an amicus brief ourselves.
No.
So-
It would have to come from the town.
Correct.
Madam
But-
Chair, I think we're off the topic here.
Right. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, the question then is, to leave it out, as an attorney, I find that to be head in the sand.
I'd like to make a quick comment. So under inventory and assessment, we say things that are kind of scary. We say, like, maybe we don't have enough water, and we're looking at regional water, and those are kind of facts that we have as a reference, and then you decide what to do about them. For me personally, 3A is like the fact that we have a water shortage. It's just a fact. It's a law out there. It's a fact. And I guess I'm puzzled why we would remove all reference to that fact. And it strikes me that the fear seems to be that if we acknowledge the fact that there is a law, that by default we are having a predetermined judgment that we are going to comply no matter what. And for me, that's just a disconnect. I want all my facts. I want to know what's out there so I can manage to it. So to remove that fact seems counterintuitive to a master plan, as does having the fact that the Winthrop School may or may not come into play. It's a fact. It may and it may not. That's a fact. So again, to remove that as a reference point seems sort of the equivalent of saying let's remove, because it could be a foregone conclusion that we don't want to join the regional water supply, that we shouldn't mention that we have water shortage. It's just counterintuitive. That's my opinion.
I think,
So to finish off the opinion, I agree with Bill's statement that to frame it positively, to say we support smart growth, we support integrated transportation, we support a clear and strong vision for the downtown, and it's all in alignment. It just happens to be in alignment with what the state's underlying goals are. I think that's great. I fully support that. But to remove all reference to 3A seems, to quote Marnie, naive, and it also seems, to me as a planning board, irresponsible, because it's a fact that we should just be aware of. That's all.
Maybe it could be a footnote perhaps, but I don't think we should be expounding
Could be,
on.
if you wanted to take it to that extreme, sure. But to remove it entirely as if it didn't exist seems naive and irresponsible.
No, and the steering committee recognized it as an issue, so I don't think it's really, the planning board should be, I think, respectful of what the members of the steering committee considered. And certainly, in the way Barrett Planning had drafted the key issue, they essentially said the town has to do this and this. And when I rewrote it, I said, this is what the law says, and these are the issues, and the town itself will decide one way or another, hopefully with some guidance from the highest court in the Commonwealth. And so 3A may be there, and we may have to deal with it. We may not. The town may elect to say, we'll suffer any consequence of
Right.
that. But we should know what those consequences are.
That's the hard part, because all the pieces keep
Well, so
moving.
that's why the Supreme Judicial
Yes.
Court will expound on that.
And that's why you want to keep your eye on that piece of data.
I don't think we want to have 3A out there as a constraint. What we might want to do is, if I can use your language, Darcy, is to sort of have our goals, and then say somewhere, maybe even just in a footnote, goals 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all, simpatico with the state's recent emphasis on, transportation centrality as through chapter 3A.
I think this is also going back to how you look at key issues versus opportunities too. I mean, I think I agree with you, like, Jonathan, that the 3A and Winthrop School being included as the inventory and assessment, but if you look at 3A as a key issue versus if you take an opportunity to look at the fact that we have a commuter rail in downtown, like, we have an opportunity because we have that commuter rail in town. And there are a lot of opportunities that bring to how we may improve the commercial district, for instance. Winthrop School, as an example, as a key issue, with the key issue being we may combine the schools. And what are you going to do with the zoning in downtown and everything else? Well, the opportunity is to improve commercial development downtown. How you go about doing that could take in consideration whether or not that school gets made available or not. But I think that is like the main purpose in changing the perspective on defining an issue, focusing on 3A versus creating the opportunity to look at something in a downtown commuter rail. Like, that is, it's not ignoring the thing at all. It's including it as part of the inventory and what you look at to achieve a goal, but it's not focusing on it as
Sure.
the.
So to tie a ribbon around this, what the board could decide or discuss is whether to de-emphasize or remove. I know I would not support removing, but I'm fine with refocusing emphasis, but to remove it is, in my opinion, irresponsible. It was put to a vote. I can tell you I would vote not to just remove it. That I wouldn't feel good as a planning board member just to remove reference to it.
I wouldn't include it as.
Let me just make a comment. I think what Bill outlined as the process where the town actually comes together and decides what is the downtown gonna look like, that is what is gonna happen. I mean, 3A is a name that's out there really, and it's got some provisions on it that are in a state of flux. They will change over time. But the town is gonna decide what it wants to see through a process and using the consultants. I think that's one of the benefits of having the form-based, where this gets analyzed at the outset, say, well, if you were to do this, this is what it's gonna look like. The town is gonna have a chance to evaluate that and give some direction to the, through the public engagement, to the design team. And they're not dictating anything. They're looking to the town, tell us what you want. And so they're looking for the town to have that communication. So the very description, Bill, that you gave us is actually what is going to happen. The town is gonna decide whether it's gonna be a very small downtown or a larger downtown, whether, the Winthrop, you can't take it off the table, but it's because eventually, I assume, but you don't need it to design your downtown. I mean, it's 14 acres that would be, you would do your downtown a little differently if that were not available, but you can still do it and should do a downtown study. And the great thing with the form-based code is that you do all that work up front. You don't wait for a developer to come in and tell you how to do your housing and where it goes, on different properties, and go through a special permit process or whatever. But,
To add to what Emil, oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, that's it.
Add to what Emil just said, what, for me, the key takeaway with what he just said is that the town's going to do what Bill said to do, whether we change the wording in this plan or not. Because that's what the consultant's assignment is, what Bill just said and what Emil just said. It's not to look at whether 3A or Winthrop School is mentioned or not mentioned in here, and it's not the main event.
So forgive me, I recognize that I'm new and fresh and I'm learning. But I'd ask, what is the intent of a master plan? Is it not to develop what the town wants for the community? And going on your key opportunities, I like opportunities over issues, is what are the limitations that we have today? What do we need to change those limitations in order to accommodate whatever that town desires? Why do we need to call out any particular risk? Because we can't see into the future over the next, when was this built? 1965, then redone in 2004. For the next 10 years or so, we can't accommodate or call out every issue that may come up. What we do is we build if I understand correctly, we build a master plan for what the town wants. Again, create the limitations within there, understand what they are, and what we need to do if we want to accommodate growth in different areas. And then that's the master plan. And then our charter is, as these things come in, to say, well, that charter says you need to build this. Can we accommodate that within our master plan? If not, do we need to address that? I just don't know if you bring in state issues or concerns into the master plan when that is just merely a guiding document. Our charter is, or the planning board's charter is then to say, these issues the state brings up now or 10 years from now, and let's look at our master plan, how it fits in or it doesn't fit in. I just don't know if you call out particular state mandates or things this year or 10 years from now in a master plan.
Well, I think if you were to modify it, I would think you'd make a statement like, the town has to assess what the mandate is, and that has not been done yet. I mean, it is a mystery as to what it could look like. I mean, it's the consultants that we're gonna be working with who are gonna give us the ideas. It could be this, or that, and you kind of going down a path, and, it's just that, you can't say no to something if you don't have no idea what it's gonna be.
No, but you can put limitations what we can do today, right? What are the resources we have today?
Could I just interrupt
Yeah.
though, just
Sure.
for a minute here? This is getting into rewriting the master plan, and this is something that I have said repeatedly. We are not going to rewrite this master plan. We can reorganize it, we can amend it in some ways, but I think it's extremely disrespectful of the 3 years that the master plan steering committee spent on this document to say, well, we don't like this and we don't like that and we're going to change that. I think that there's probably a happy medium here between what everyone is saying. I recognize that in looking at this key issues and reorganizing them, that I probably added more information than I needed, and I can shorten that and just state pretty cogently what the law requires and what the issues are. But someone reading this document should know where the town is with respect to that. And I will look at the inventory and assessment.
But cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth are up in arms about this. And this,
Well, of course.
and this is a home rule state in which the legislature represents all those cities and towns.
But Bill, this
And
is
I
all,
think there's a 50-50 chance that they will backtrack, or that the court will say, wait a minute, you've gone too far, and so, rather than create a document which makes it look like, oh, we're sitting here and we're so afraid of 3A, we create a document about what we want, and then if 3A, turns out to be something we have to live with, we can at least say, well, look, our master plan is at least quite sympathetic to 3A. I mean, that we want many of the same things, rather than sort of build it in, especially if it's gonna be a plan that's gonna hang out there for 10 or
Yeah.
15 or 20 years. Who knows what's gonna happen to 3A over the next 10 or 15
I
years.
tend to agree with that, and I don't want to sidetrack the conversation, but there is a chance.
we're
it
getting
could-
sidetracked, and
Yeah, no, absolutely, but let me-
I really want to stop this conversation
Okay.
about 3A, because every planning board meeting is getting
Can
derailed.
I just mention
with
something not
3A.
about 3A? That there's a potential bill right now going through with 10A, or, I'm sorry, 40A, that may make it so communities don't have to adhere to 3A,
That's right.
based upon their 40B commitments.
Great.
So there is a
Well,
possibility that
we're-
may not be a thing.
It's all in flux.
It's all in flux,
Yes.
and I think we have to just say, it's all in flux.
Yeah.
That's what we need to say. We need to speak the truth.
Yeah.
It's in flux. But, our compliance with 40B, it's about 4.4%. So we're not going to benefit from that.
I have not a 3A question either. I just have a question on the process. So the master planning steering committee came up with this, and then it came to the planning board because
For
we,
approval.
so we approve the work they did. I just trying to make sure people understand what that process is.
Well, that process is, and so the master plan steering committee did a significant amount of work, and also the town paid a significant amount of money to consultants to come up with this document. So we may want to say key issues and opportunities, that's fine, but I ask everyone to give me something by noon on Monday, and I got introductions to key issues and nothing else. No one else took the initiative and redlined that section. I did that. Now, I think that it's fair to ask, how people react to this. So the only thing that seems to generate any controversy is 3A. And I will concede that what I wrote was probably more information than is needed. I will shorten that to a couple of paragraphs, maybe two, and go from there. But
I guess the reason I was bringing up what the structure was one, for the public to understand it, because I didn't really understand it. And then, who has the authority at the end of the day for the document? I mean, are we just saying yes or no to what they submitted, or are we actually, do we have the authority to change it? I don't really, I'm trying to understand the structure.
we have authority to amend this document.
Okay,
I, as a chair, have the authority to say we are not rewriting this document. We have other work to do. I mean, once we get to the implementation plan, we will see all the work that the planning board needs to do. And I don't want to spend our time arguing about a document when we can be working on, for example, I know, Pat, you're interested, I think, in the estate overlay district and rewriting that to make it more usable.
Right.
So there are other things that we can do as a planning board that are significantly more constructive than going back and forth with respect to this document that will get some attention from the public, probably very limited. It will be used as a reference for boards and commissions, but it's the goals, the visions, they are what's going to affect decisions as well as what's set forth in the implementation plan.
Marnie, I wrote 2 sentences under MBTA communities requirements. May I read those 2 sentences and see if they resonate with anybody?
Fine,
I didn't mean to interrupt if you weren't finished.
I am finished.
Okay. So this would be at the end of, or in lieu of, but just 2 sentences. The opportunity for Hamilton is to collaboratively build a community vision of what an ideal town center district would look like in the future. Once this vision is established, study and understand the deeper underlying interests and goals, to Bill's point, of the MBTA communities requirements and creatively look for all overlaps between the town vision and the MBTA goals.
That's it, fine, good.
2 sentences.
That's it, that's great.
And that's what Emil said in 15 sentences. He said exactly the same thing. Are these 2 sentences acceptable? Can we vote on these 2 sentences?
I'm going to take them under advisement and
Okay.
look at what Emil wrote, and I really do think it's helpful to, because the MBTA Act has a purpose. I don't think it has goals. I mean,
Okay,
its
that's fine.
purpose
Yes.
is to increase housing production.
Okay, let me put it differently. If folks resonate with that, could Marnie have permission to recraft that sentence so that it has rigor?
Right, and I do want to kind of
Could,
focus.
could we hear from the rest of the board? Could we do that, please?
You want me to make a motion?
Yes.
I move that am I getting some feedback here?
You know, could I just interject? I think it's really not advisable to move with respect to specific provisions of this document.
I was joking.
We want to move,
Yes,
we want to approve the document as a whole.
yes.
So I think that, you know, when we start to make amendments, things, you know, pop into your head. But I think it's important for people to understand what the issues are.
Yes.
You know, what the potential, this SJC might do, you know, or somehow. So I appreciate what you're saying.
I think there are ways to allay people's fears, but not put our heads in the sand. Could we work together toward that, please?
Right. So I have your language. I don't know if Emil did anything, but I have Jonathan's language. So putting that aside, does anyone have any other comments with respect to the key issues, which, you know, maybe,
Well, you had comments, I had comments on key issues, so, we all wrote a rude and crude introduction, so those could be
okay,
melded.
so we have 3 introductions. Do we have anything else on them?
Under utilizing public spaces, I had a comment,
Okay, hold on.
simple. Just to summarize, their key issues focused entirely on the existing master plan that was just finished for Patton Park. And that master plan, again, is in a silo. It doesn't in any way, even for a moment, address the connectivity, potential connectivity with the rest of the town or the relationship with the rest of the town. It's completely contained in the bounds of the Patton Park, so I just added the following simple sentences. Additionally, Hamilton should look more broadly at the relationship between Patton Park and the surrounding areas, the opportunities to tie this important public space more integrally into the greater downtown. Simple. One of those break the silos.
Did you add that as a key issue?
It's an additional sentence under their key issue, under utilizing public spaces. So at the end of it, as a second, possibly, I said as a second to last or the last sentence, add those statements. Do you want a
Oh,
hard,
I see, I
do
see.
you want a hard copy of it? or-
Actually, what I did, their caption was utilizing public spaces, and I changed it to open space and recreation / cultural and historical resources. I tried to use the same captions that were in the inventory and assessment, so that's why I had trouble finding it, so. Because I think I had something with respect to Patton Park as well. And I said a key issue for the town is how to integrate Patton Park more fully into a cohesive plan for the town center and to enable it to serve as a reflection of the town's character and sense of place.
Yeah, same idea.
Same idea.
Yep.
So So I'll look at your language and attempt to integrate that.
My comment on that was, I think we spent $200,000 in a study around Patton Park, and I didn't see anything as a result of that study or effort in this plan,
Oh, yeah,
which was
no,
complete.
it focuses really heavily on that study, and it says this master plan for Patton Park should be a model for all future planning.
But it didn't result in any actionable item to address, you know, we talk about it generally that it exists and it should
Oh,
be
well, it's in the.
a model, but it doesn't have
It's in the
anything
implementation plan
to,
to use the,
maybe I missed it.
yeah, it's all in the implementation plan. I'll tell you where it is.
I missed it on any project. I guess I was referring to a project list for funding, and there was nothing in a project list, but maybe it is in
Yeah,
the
it's right here.
implementation
So,
plan.
and I added a note to that.
Yeah,
It said, commit town resources to pursuing the recommendations identified in the Patton Park Master Plan, including universal
Okay.
pathways, shade trees, drainage improvements, improved signage, but again, no improved connections to town center, so I added
Yeah.
that underneath.
I'll go on. Yeah, I missed it.
But it's 5A under Section 5, open space and recreation goal.
Okay, I think,
Chart.
I think at this juncture, we've made some progress. I apologize to everyone for not getting to the other comments. I think, Darcy, you had more stylistic comments?
Yeah, I edited them out. I didn't include them in my final. It was an update that I emailed.
Yeah, you emailed one and it had the page numbers.
It was just
and
one, yeah.
numerals. I couldn't track your changes. I
Oh,
couldn't
really?
find them.
Well,
I found them.
you did?
You
When I
did?
opened it?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try again. Maybe my,
I'm using an Apple, the Page program, so I don't know how it comes through on if
it
you're
came
using.
through as Roman numerals.
Yeah, mine too.
Oh, that's because the pages were in Roman numerals, so I kept them in Roman numerals. But if you want, I can convert them.
So, I mean, the master plan doesn't have,
Master plan doesn't have
has,
any.
doesn't
very
have
few.
Roman
Really
numerals.
funny.
That's very
It's,
few.
In the master plan that I downloaded, they were all Roman numerals.
Really? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that was the thing, I was looking, the first one, I was
Not in
looking,
here.
and it said add a period after town, and I'm like, I don't see that.
Yeah, maybe it has to do with the operating system I'm
Yeah.
using or something. I don't know, but that's what
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
double check that,
I will.
because, you know, if you
Huh.
have typos and whatnot, we want to find them. So, yeah, if you, or even just go through, if you made notes on your copy of the master plan, your hard copy,
Yep.
you could just say page whatever.
Yeah, I'll have to count the pages
Yeah.
to make sure I don't have any extras.
So, I think that I'll make every effort to incorporate what we have discussed here. And
I do have Google.
we can then address that at our next meeting. And Pat, I know you had a number of items, and I apologize, but a lot of them concern the implementation, section. So we can discuss your concerns at our next meeting. And I know Matt Hamill found a couple typos, so we're making progress. We have to be mindful of, you know, other things that might arise on our agenda, like the stormwater management regulations. So at this point, I'm going to call a halt to that, the discussion of the master plan. I don't know if, Emil, you have any report about the town center initiative?
Well, there was one meeting with the advisory committee. It was supposed to be an internal meeting, just to kind of get acquainted, but the UTIL was there. They were present. Joe, Rick was in on Zoom, but, well, it was all a Zoom call. But it was basically, this is not the beginning yet of it. This was a kind of an introductory meeting, so the advisory committee could meet with the consultants, but there was nothing discussed there
Did we say last, even if it was just an introduction, that it was gonna be noticed and on Zoom, those meetings?
No, the town manager said it was not, they were not open meeting requirements on this particular advisory committee.
I'm just referring to our last conversation around the effort at this meeting. I'm not asking about what the town manager required of the process. We agreed, I think, in the last meeting as a point of transparency, and given the fact that the advisory committee wasn't something that we collectively appointed, it was gonna be a noticed and public meeting every time they met. And at last meeting, I requested for the second time that I be part of that process on the advisory committee. I'm the only voting member of the board with children in the educational program in Hamilton. I'm the only person
Could I
on the board
interrupt,
that.
Pat?
No, sorry, you can't yet. But I'm the only person on the board that also walks to the downtown and this library. I coach soccer at the field across the street. We walk to the restaurants in town. So I am the one, I think more than anyone on this board, utilizing the infrastructure and all the resources we're talking about protecting as part of that process. So I'm just kind of disappointed that it's not being considered, given that I probably do represent the community and have a background in managing 150 acres of commercial property under a great estate bylaw, and have recently expanded 100,000 square feet of an R&D facility. I think pretty well qualified to participate in an effort like this.
And I think that you should reach out to Joe Demilovitz and tell him exactly what you told us.
Yeah.
But because we have two members of the planning board, I believe did get a clearance from town council that two members of the planning board could be,
Yeah,
participate. But I think three would push it over the edge, and that would be a meeting of the planning.
But they're supposed to be public, they're supposed to be
No.
noticed and public, which doesn't,
That's
which then it
actually
doesn't.
what my understanding is, that Joe
Criteria.
Demilovitz disagreed with that. And this is an advisory committee, and apparently it does not have to be that way. So I know there was a task force at one time with respect to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, and that task force was very informal, and I don't know that none of their meetings were ever publicly noticed. So it's a question for the town manager. It's not something that the planning board can answer.
Well, if
Okay?
the planning board is ultimately gonna be responsible for voting on the outcome of the effort, I would say that we should probably have pretty good input on how,
Well,
goes about being executed.
if there is a.
since it
form-
was a vote we took to even
No, but if there's a form.
trigger the town vote to apply the funding of $125,000, of which,
If
you
there's a form-based code produced, it would have to be approved at town meeting.
but would have to go through this board, right?
It would,
have to
but
go-
I mean, it would still have to be approved at town meeting. And, you know, my understanding of what this consultant is doing is that
Yeah.
they're drafting this form-based code as, in a sense, protective in the event that the town has to comply some fashion with Section 3A. So the goal is to produce this form-based plan. So, but again, you know, the planning board doesn't have the power to appoint you to this advisory
Yeah,
committee.
I guess you're just putting me out there on an island to do it myself.
Well,
You're asking me to address what Joe, you guys appointed Jonathan and Emil.
No,
I mean, I
we-
don't know how
no,
that, it's not John, it's like Joe
no.
reached out to you guys.
Yes, it's
That
exactly what it
something
was.
that-
so let's just back up a minute. You know, in terms of a form-based code, Emil's the only person in the town of Hamilton who has experience with formulating and implementing a form-based code. So he was a logical person to be on that committee. And then the planning board, my recollection is we never discussed any other members being part of that. Because it was, if you recall, kind of an initiative of the Hamilton Development Corporation and the planning board to pursue the form-based code for the downtown. So Emil, we identified as a person who has knowledge of a form-based code. And from there, it all went to the town manager to formulate that advisory committee. I mean, this
Yeah.
committee doesn't vote. It just advises
Right.
UTIL. It
But
doesn't.
and then and you may not have seen the email that I sent, but my concern also was how the original committee of 4 was decided and if that was ever voted on by the select board, because I do think there needs to be accountability to the town, and we've seen it with the school building committee, that there was quite a debacle with
But
that.
the school building committee actually voted on one of the.
Oh, no, I'm talking about how it was created.
Well, but the
But part of
advis-
the debacle is how it was created.
No, but the school building committee actually made a decision. This advisory committee is
I'm
not
not talking about the
making-
advisory committee, I'm talking about the 4 people who are in the original committee, which are Rick, Joe, Emil, and Patrick Reffert. I'm not sure how that group was
Well, the
decided.
Hamilton Development.
And they're the
Corp-
ones who then ended up choosing, so they were using authority to choose people for an advisory
No,
committee.
excuse me, that's incorrect. Joe Demilovich chose the people on the advisory committee.
That's not what he's told people.
That's not what, how did they get on the advisory committee?
It wasn't
then?
just Joe, it was a couple of people, but, and I don't even, yeah.
But the
well,
Hamilton Development Corporation is providing some funds for this initiative.
Let me just answer let me answer why I'm on it.
Oh, I don't have an issue
No, I
with
know.
why
You should
you're
be
on
on
it.
it, and
Yeah.
so should Jonathan. I also just want to be on it.
Right.
No one's saying you shouldn't be on it.
I was
No.
asked, number one, I was asked to help with the RFQ,
Right.
to write the scope of services, having done this before on other form-based codes. So my role was to initially, as a volunteer, give the town scope of services for this particular project. It is a general thing, there were no decisions made in this, this is really a format to conduct a study in the downtown area. That was made, and the town did the rest of the RFQ. It then went out for public, and because I wrote the scope of services, I was asked to sit in on the evaluation of the respondents. We had 4 people who submitted a response to the RFQ. We interviewed 2 of them. We narrowed it down to 2, and we conducted an interview, and I was asked to be on that because of having written the scope of services on it. So I had questions for each of them about that. That's how I got on that selection committee, and then that selection committee took a vote of the 2, which is the one that was preferred, and it was unanimous. Everybody agreed on the best choice. That's how that happened.
So you guys were making decisions, so that group probably should have been subject to open meeting laws, I'm assuming, if you guys made a vote on who were the consultants. I'm getting questions from people, and you can get frustrated with me.
I'm not
but-
getting frustrated with you, but I think your questions have to be directed to the town manager, because the planning board is not in charge of the steering committee. We don't have,
Who has the ultimate authority? Who is a consultant,
the town manager.
Yes,
All
he
I'm
has a
asking
budget
is the
for
you have
consultants.
2 people in this room that are on the advisory committee. I'm gonna ask Joe, but it would also be nice if you guys
as a planning board, said, we would like
said
you to be
this is
on.
another individual willing to help, who's got a relevant background and experience. And if we want, unless you want to be in a situation like we were in for the last hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, rewriting a master plan that was conceived of a group of people that didn't have a collective buy-in on what the outcome should be.
Well,
You know, it's,
I'm just gonna give you a short answer on that. There's a lot of concern that the perception is this is a project driven by the planning board because I'm on it and Jonathan's on it. That is not the case. I'm not gonna report to this body on all of the advisory committee meetings, what was talked about. I keep people up to date where we are within the schedule, but, you know, I'm not to report back to the planning board, nor is Jonathan, really, in this, you know, what happens there. This whole project is gonna come right home to the planning board in the beginning of the year. Once that code comes into effect, this planning board's gonna be involved throughout. If you wanna make changes to it, plenty of time. There'll be public hearings, you can go to the public hearings. and comment on it. That'll all be taken as part of, under consideration. You know,
But you know, it's
I'm not here to decide.
Right, well,
to
and
tell
I
you how
am
the
confused.
sausage
We are
tastes,
not-
right?
I don't
We
know
are not-
could I just interrupt? I really don't know what the focus of this conversation is, because as a planning board, we can't vote to,
Well, we could vote and say we think he should be on. We could do that.
no.
And we could send that information to Joe.
No.
The other thing is, what I said in my letter was, Robin Stein said, if there's two people on the planning board on a subcommittee, that is subject, makes it subject to open meeting law. We can listen to the context. I would be happy to send you the video with the timestamp in it, but I don't believe adding one more person is changing that. And I'm not sure what was said to town council, but what I'm telling you is, there is a video of Robin Stein saying two people trigger open meeting law. So that was a town council recommendation.
So what I will do, I will send a letter to Joe and I will ask him the question. Because I know Robin Stein said that, and I think that was being overly cautious, because two people are not a quorum, neither are three. But
Correct.
three gets a little closer to the edge than two. So it's really entirely up to Joe and town council to determine, A, whether three members of the planning board can be on it, and B, whether they want to expand this advisory committee. So I just urge you to just step back a little bit and realize that this planning board cannot vote to put somebody on an advisory committee. It's out
Which
of our
I
hands.
understand, but the problem is, nobody really understands how this committee happened, how the original
Well,
four
this
people
is something
happened.
that addressed with Joe
No, all right,
Delarosa.
so I will see how he responds to that. But that is a concern that I'm getting from people, is there were these
Well,
four original people, and then they're the ones who decided who's gonna be on the advisory committee, and what is that, and how did that happen?
There are many committees in town that are not elected. They're appointed. I mean, this happens all the time. So it's,
But those are subject to open meeting law. That would be the difference.
well, the task force was not. So these are advisory. They're not, it's advisory. There's no votes going to be taken by the advisory committee. They're asked
Right,
for
that's
their
not the
opinion.
committee I was talking about, but yes,
But this is the
I
commi-
understand that. I understand that.
So that's the difference. So let's turn to minutes. So we did get minutes from May 21st, 2024.
I should mention Matt joined us,
Marnie?
by the way, sorry.
Marnie, before we go to minutes, can we talk for just a moment about Gordon Conwell?
Certainly. I was going to turn to that after minutes.
Oh, go right ahead then. Let's do minutes.
So I took a look at the minutes. I made my normal edits. I think they're in pretty good shape. If anybody else has any typos or comments, please
So this is
speak up.
the May 21st minute?
Yes, yes. I sent them to you, I believe, earlier today.
And then, yeah, so I reread them. It said that there were statements read into the record. Should those statements actually be, the statements that were read into the record, should those actually be in the minutes?
Where do you see that?
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I just took a picture of
Well,
what
I wasn't going to go back and go through the YouTube video and do that. I mean, this is why we have,
Well, I didn't know if we wanted to send that back, or I can go through it and find that part. The other thing was the list of advisory committee members. I didn't know if that should be included in the minutes. It said that we went through the list, but I didn't know if the actual name should be listed as part of the minutes.
if you want to go back to the YouTube video and amend these
Those
minutes.
two things, okay.
We can approve these minutes subject to your transmitting additional information.
And then the last thing
Patrick.
was just that Pat Norton had asked for a second time at that meeting to be on the advisory committee.
But he's asking the wrong entity.
Okay, I got it now.
I wanted to comment on the comment you had made regarding the civil engineer and just provide clarity on the input the civil engineer had on the rules and regs. As a comment, they provided me a comment regarding a question, and it wasn't clear in the rules and regs who the permitting authority was, which was more clearly outlined in the bylaw. And the only other comment that was made outside of that was our reference to the removal of phosphorus, which they thought was progressive, although didn't have any way to categorize or measure that removal in a design criteria. But the updated stormwater management handbook from the state will address that. So he thought it relevant to leave it in. But those were the two comments since you raised the concern.
Could you then, I think then we'll have to postpone approval of these minutes. I suggest then that you and Beth forward your proposed amendments to these minutes to Patrick.
Yep,
Great.
that's easy.
Okay.
And then do we have other minutes that we were supposed to be voting on?
No.
Because I had comments on January 10th of 2023, and
Did you get any other minutes?
No.
2024.
The only ones I had were the May 21st. So if there are other minutes that we haven't,
We already covered the January.
Yeah,
I
we
think
did.
we did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
So we're holding these minutes. We'll bring them up at our next meeting. And in the meantime, you forward your amendments to Patrick, and then we'll consider revised minutes.
Great.
And so, Gordon Conwell, you wanted to say something about that?
Well, I don't know if all the board knows that there's a deal that's been struck between Gordon Conwell and two private equity firms to buy up all of the apartments and to do some 40B, to do some, and do the market rate housing for the rest. There's a little clause in there, I don't quite know how they're going to reserve a few apartments for staff and faculty at Gordon Conwell, but they can work that out.
Could I just interrupt, because I forwarded the letter that I received from
Right,
Scott.
I'm looking, I forwarded to you the actual announcement from Gordon Conwell.
Right, I saw that as well.
Yeah, it's much more in-depth.
Right, so I don't know that in that announcement they actually mentioned 40B, but I will,
They said there was something in there about affordable housing.
right, so they did indicate they wanted to reserve some of these units for their student and faculty.
Oh, yeah, they're gonna do extensive renovations,
Right.
absolutely.
But I don't believe they're actually going to change the footprint of the
Well, what I
buildings.
thought we should do, since they're going to ask us to revisit and reopen the whole question of master planning the Hill, is that we ask them for a plan for what part of the parcel they want to sell, and for the developers to give us as best they can, any changes they propose in the building footprints, in the parking, in the circulation, that would affect the abutters. And so we can say, all right, here's what they want, right? And the question is, can we do a master plan for, do we want to do a master plan for the whole hill that, you know, meshes with that, merges with that? Because that's what they've got willing buyers wanting to do that. So there was a reluctance, when we were discussing this originally, to divide the property and do one master plan for the rest of the hill, and one plan and one, district for the lower
Right.
half.
Right,
But let's get a plan for the lower half,
right, well,
or what they would propose for the lower half.
we will have to see how that plays out, because there's nothing before the planning board right now
No,
with respect to that sale.
We should ask the seminary to please send us a plan for what they want.
Well, my thinking might be on that score. I have two thoughts. One is if they want a master plan for the remainder of the site, then a condition of that would be to see what they're intending for the apartments. And so right now, we paused consideration of the overlay district. And we did that for the purpose of permitting the seminary and the select, well, Joe, or a member of a member of the select board, and John Witten, to draft a development agreement. And so we, in the, I think probably 6 months since that time, at least, we've never seen a development agreement, and the seminary negotiated the sale of the apartments. So at this juncture, I don't think that the planning board has anything before it. I don't,
No, we should have everything before us.
well, we don't, and my
Well,
thinking,
send them a note back saying, the board's, you know.
I'm not
would be
sure
happy to
they're,
entertain us.
I'm thinking that they're not going to be asking the planning board to approve the sale of those apartments.
No, but the planning board has to approve a zoning change in order, these
That's
guys
the
are not gonna
question.
buy this property, signed, sealed, and delivered without a zoning that enables them to do what they want.
Well, I have a feeling that there's a little bit more involved than that, and I'm going to be very circumspect about that. So my only point with respect to what's happening with those apartments is that it's a generational opportunity for Hamilton, that if it can get 25% affordable units on the SHI, then the entire 209 units will count toward our SHI, and we will meet our 10% requirement of affordable housing, and we will have protection against 40B for the foreseeable future. That is
I have
the
a
critical
clarification.
thing. So with,
I just ask is it per building that it's 25%? Or is it over the whole
I
all the
think
buildings?
I think it might be
Per
per
building.
group of buildings.
Oh, per group, okay, I thought
But
it was,
25% overall, but.
okay, that's what, I didn't know if it was per
So
building
the
or.
nuances of that, have to be worked out. But right now, we don't have anything in front of us, and it may be that, that they won't need to come to the planning board for any approvals with respect to those
How
buildings.
can that be?
If they don't change the footprint of the buildings, there's the potential that
No, I thought it was very clear that when a dormitory protected under the Dover Amendment is converted into multifamily housing, that's not allowable under our zoning. The dormitories aren't allowed either, but they're protected under Dover. And unless, I don't think they're gonna get Dover protection by whittling out 3 or 4 apartments for faculty. I don't see how they can go ahead with this project without having a change of zoning.
Well,
But
yeah, and
we could ask town council, I don't see how that's possible. Does anybody else? I thought that's where we were before, that they can't.
They didn't change the use, it would just be a simple site plan review. That's what I understood.
well,
But the use,
The
the
underlying
current,
zoning is,
there is no allowed use for that land other than,
Oh, for the
one-
dorms?
yeah, for
We're-
1 acre,
we're-
for 1 acre zoning.
excuse me, we're speculating here, and,
No,
no, actually, I think there is some suggestion that if they do not change the use and do not change the structure in any way, that these apartments can be grandfathered in. Now, if you remember, Harbor Light wanted to connect the buildings, and so the ZBA never issued a decision, but it advised Harbor Light Community Partners that the change of use was permissible, but the seminary and Harbor Light would not be entitled to a variance because they were changing the footprint of the building. So that might be,
Well, yes, but that's because Harbor Light is a Chapter 40B, so they don't have to abide by the underlying zoning. But if they intend, as the statement is here, for most of these units to be used for market rate, let's say 3/4 of them, that is a change of use that would require a change of zoning. Not 40B. 40B gets away with doing anything it wants. But market rate apartments are not allowed anywhere in the current zoning of that.
right.
that business.
What I can do is to request clarification from Scott Sunquist and whatever. But as I said before, I think the most important thing with respect to these apartments is that every conceivable effort is made to have 25% of those units affordable so that the town is in the best position possible with respect to its obligations under 40B.
Yeah, that would be great.
agreed.
Let's just get more information.
Agreed. So, did the planning board want to take any vote about recommending to the select board that they file an amicus brief with the Supreme Judicial Court? Yes or no? And if that's the case, we would need a motion for that.
I would like to make a motion that we suggest that the select board submit an amicus brief in the Milton case.
Recommend or
Second.
suggest?
Recommend. Thank you for that clarification.
Second.
Any discussion on that? As I said before, I think that the opportunity for the town to explain the ramifications of the guidelines on small towns without infrastructure should be considered. I think that the law is going to be expounded by very polished attorneys, but I think it is an opportunity to put the law in a real-world context of how it can affect these historical communities and how the law can have unintended consequences such that it would make a community like Hamilton much less attractive to the tourists who come through this area to see, what we like to think of as a bucolic setting. So,
Well, and I think obviously the amicus brief is what you're saying is to make it applicable to our town and the issues that it would create in our town.
well, to just explain the circumstance, to put it in to paint a picture of
That one size doesn't fit all.
that
Correct.
one size doesn't
Yeah.
fit all. Exactly.
Milton. I don't know about the Rockport one, if they want to do that as well. And then, for me, one of the issues I have with the whole case is, with Milton and the amicus brief is, the town voted, and basically, the voters are being sued, because if they voted for the zoning, they would not be sued by the Attorney General.
Terrible.
So basically, I feel like it's invalidating our entire voting process, and that is even more concerning to me than 3A.
Yeah, that's
Well,
what I,
one of the issues that the Supreme Judicial Court asked to be briefed by the public or by communities in their notice that they put on their docket was, does the Attorney General have standing to enforce this law?
Right.
So I think this, if you look at what, I read it into the record at the last hearing, what they asked for was crystal clear.
Great.
So anyhow, we'll go to a vote, so when I call your name, please indicate whether you assent. Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So now that we have one thing left on our agenda, or it's not really on our agenda, but we have one thing left to do.
Make a motion to
Adjourn?
adjourn. I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So you got questions now? What are we gonna do about the meeting in June second?
July 2nd, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, why don't, we can consider that at our next meeting, and I can talk to Patrick about why this schedule went so crazy.
Okay.
You need to take a roll call on the meeting, on
Yep.
the motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Right, yes.
Just checking.
Pat Norton,
Aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye.
When is the next meeting?
The 25th.
25th of June.